Chapter 1, Segment 3 starts off with the Fourier analysis, and Fourier developed an analysis that permits modern scientists to better understand complex sounds, and one of the sounds that they introduced were known as sine waves, which is the simplest sound that one could hear. Because it's so simple and so pure, air pressure can continuously change the frequency. One cycle of a sine wavelength is a period of a sine wave, and the phase is relatively a fixed mark, and it's often measured in degrees, which I believe would be 360 degrees. A room full of sounds can be broken down into sine waves with amplitudes and its own phases. Sine waves are also, Fourier analysis is also very useful because hearing researchers use that to explore the visual fields, and that would be spatial frequencies, so the number of changes between dark and light over 1 degree of a visual field. The next section introduced is sensory neuroscience and biology of perception, and two scientists in this, Webner and Fechner, I believe that's how his name is pronounced, did a study of perception on animals, and they believed that there was some sort of continuity between humans and animals, which would be backed up by Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Another scientist introduced is Mueller, and he formulated the doctrine of specific nerve energies. And he said that we cannot be aware of the world itself, but we can be aware of the activity in the nerves. So it's not about how the nerve is stimulated rather than which nerve is stimulated. And he also, in this section, you also are introduced to the 12 different types of cranial nerves, which are mainly dedicated to our sensory and our motor system. Two types of nerve fibers examples that were introduced were cells that respond to an increase or a decrease in temperature. And an increase in temperature would be the campesine warm fiber to fire, and then the decrease in temperature would be the methanol, which is like that cool icy feeling. There are areas in the cortex that are dedicated to perception. So our primary sensory cortex is more complex, and visual perception uses a cortex that extends from the parietal into some sections of the temporal lobe. And because of the processing extending from beyond the primary cortex and the information combines, it's known as polysensory. Another scientist introduced was Helmholtz, who disliked the idea of vitalism, and he doesn't like it because it violates the law of conservation of energy. He wanted the behavior in the brain to follow the physical law. While he was doing this study, he was trying to figure out how the transmissions, how fast what their speed was. So he estimated that in a frog's leg, it was about 90 feet per second, and in about humans, it was 165 to 330 feet per second. This was quickly proved wrong through various scientists. So Cahal showed that neurons did not touch one another. There were gaps, and Sherrington named the gaps synapses, and Lowy discovered that one neuron can either excite or inhibit another neuron.